Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us again today. And we are going to the Great White North. And I love it. I will go to the Great White North any day that I can have fantastic people like this guy that I'm going to be talking to in this podcast. He is on LinkedIn as well as I am on LinkedIn, and that's where we met. And he is doing something really, really cool that I want to tell you about. And if you'll give me a moment, I will tell you more about him. See, well, we don't apologize. We do this on the fly. He's an integrator, an innovator, a renovator. If I could talk, would be all right. Change leader, all around good guy. Aaron Kuchirka joins me on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Aaron, one, did I get that right? And two, how are you today, man?
I am really well, and thank you. Yes, you did. Like always, just say it like a sneeze, Kuchirka, and you did it just fine, Brian. Thank you so much.
Bless you.
Absolutely. Oh, what a pleasure to talk to you today. And I just want to recognize Brian today because Brian, Cyber Monday, I don't know if you put date stamps on these or not, Brian, but your book, I just want to congratulate you for getting your book out. It's fantastic. Amazing accomplishment.
Well, Aaron, you had a big part in that too, because you were a beta reader. And, I'm surprised you didn't get through the book without falling asleep several times, or, it's probably a really good cure for insomnia. So, maybe it was peaceful and tranquil, but thank you so much for being a part of that process. And I really wanted to have you on the podcast even before that to tell your story because, man, you are doing something amazing. So let's go here. Most people are trying to survive a pandemic. You go and buy a church to renovate during this pandemic. So let's start there, man. What prompted you to go buy a church to renovate it? And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see above Aaron, he's inside the sanctuary of the church.
Let me give you a little view. We'll just go this way. I don't want to show too much because we were cleaning a closet the other day, and there's a lot of stuff left over when a church vacates.
How beautiful is that building,
it's
Aaron?
amazing.
It's beautiful building.
Yes. Yeah. It's a 1963 Anglican and United Church. It's located in Fruitvale, British Columbia, Canada. And I'll do my own plug. So if you're on Facebook, you can follow me on Bought a Church. Our family story is on there. And that's where we spend a lot of time just showing a lot of the fun things we're doing as we're renovating this property. We really want to highlight a lot of, the family things that we're doing because I have a wife and we have two kids, 12 and 10, and we're from Saskatchewan, Canada, which is about 10 hours east of here as we go towards the eastern side of Canada. And we made a huge move in coming here to British Columbia and starting, starting this project. I just want to start off by saying I am not a pastor. So I get this question a lot. Are you opening a church? Is that why you bought a church? No, we did not buy it to open a church, but we did buy it to serve this community, to be quite honest, and to really see how we can reform it into something purposeful.
Aaron, that's a great, I'm glad you brought that up because again, I hate to see a church closing for any reason because we really need places of worship. They serve as lights in the community and beacons in the community. And I know here in the States, we have churches as old as 200 plus years old that were founded in their communities and things like that. How does one go about finding a church to buy and renovate like you and your family did?
Yeah, it's not even, I think it found us actually, to be quite honest. We were, I'll take back the story up just a year. It's a bigger story than this, but I'll just back it up just this year because really COVID is its own sub-story within this narrative. And, like many, we were impacted by the pandemic at the start, and I was laid off from work and was fortunate to to have an employer that said, go visit your family. Go visit your family in British Columbia. Your brother, I have a brother in Penticton, and my mom and dad live in Edmonton. And so we took the motorhome. And if you look at my profile, I'm an RV enthusiast.
I saw that RV enthusiast, man. That's awesome.
And so I had to, we had to get away. It was the weight of it was too much. And I was working from home anyway, doing just fine working from home. So decided to put the mobile office into motion and make a tour to the West Coast and live a little last summer. And we did that. We did that for 6 weeks and visited family, reconnected a whole pile. And on the way back home, we stopped in this beautiful community called Fruitvale, British Columbia. And we visited with my wife's friends here. And we spent 5 days in total out of our 6 week trip here, and really fell in love with the community, fell in love with the mountains.
Did you ever feel like, let me interrupt you, but did you feel like you spend 5 days and people can travel to different places and they fall in love with it and they go, oh, this is great. And we'll come back next year. We'll come back the year after, things like that. Did you think then that Fruitvale was going to become your new home?
No, quite honestly not. We were exploring quite a bit then. And the next stop actually on this journey, as we were on our way back to Saskatchewan to finish our trip, was in Calgary, Alberta. And I got a phone call July 28th from my boss, and my boss says, "Hey, you're fired." And I'm like, are you kidding me? He's like, "Yeah, you don't fit the culture here. You're done with us." And part of that was the decision to go and work on the road during COVID. And it was just a difference in values with this employer and the way that it didn't work out. But I went back home to Saskatchewan quite defeated at that point in time, thinking, okay, now what do I do? Now I'm among, a lot of other people suffering through COVID, unemployed, and looking for, a new start forward. And so we started to say, well, let's blow it up then. It is a COVID year. What's the potential? How far can we go with change if we're deliberate and intentional on how we do it? And we started looking at location change. And Fruitvale was one of the first ones that came to mind. And we found a property that almost purchased, but then this church just popped up in the real estate, and we fell in love, and we bought it sight unsold. We toured it digitally, electronically. It really fit within the COVID narrative of online and how you really travel the world and see the world differently during this time. And so we saw it online and we purchased it, and it's a wild adventure now.
Aaron, when you think about, you get that phone call and your boss says you don't fit the values that we have, there's two ways you can go with that. The first way is, what's wrong with me? Why don't I fit? Or the second thing is, okay, what's wrong with them? Because in this work from home environment, man, there's a lot of positions you could work from anywhere. I've got a guest coming on the podcast that I did a recording with today, and she's from California, went to France to see her dad. Her dad ended up passing away, and she got locked down in France. And so she had to work from France and run her business from there instead of the United States where she lives. When you got that phone call, what was your thought process? Were you mad? What kind of take me through those set of emotions? I've been there. Right. What was that like for you and your wife to get that phone call?
Yeah, well, it was really tough, and we'll back it up just a little bit. Is that I was the executive director of the Saskatchewan Forest Service. I've managed very large teams and groups and worked on organization, team building, change management. And so when I joined the organization, I knew very quickly there was a disconnect in values that wasn't going to resolve itself unless we really worked on the problem. And I challenged myself to work on the problem with my employer before I left. But we get a call like this out of the blue, and I'll say it wasn't unexpected. It was kind of almost a relief, if you will, Brian, in the sense that we had now had some conclusion to a very difficult work transition that clearly wasn't in the best of alignment for either party. And I I had that moment. I think that moment that so many leaders speak to, where I've lost my job, I've had this major force in transition, and you can either choose, as you allude to look at it as a devastating situation, or you can choose to really look at it optimistically and say, okay, where does this open my world to, right? And where can I then, and that's really what we did as a family. We truly did that. We prayed on it. We thought hard. My wife and I, really had a lot of conversation about what does this mean? Because it took us away from a place that we ultimately loved, which is our home in Saskatchewan, a home that we built, and an area that doesn't have a lot of jobs and opportunity. So upon losing this job, I lost another opportunity to live and work in a place that I loved, with family and other relationships. But instead of taking that as the end of the world and deciding which pizza delivery job I was going to take, no offense, but I mean, looking for that other opportunity to serve and film and feed my family in an area that just doesn't provide a lot of opportunity, it was scary. It was devastating. And we had to think very difficultly, very, very, it was a tough decision to think about how do we change our lives to accommodate this change in reality. And so I was fortunate, extremely fortunate, to begin working with a new company that allows me to work remotely, and have encouraged me to do this change and to move away here. They've encouraged me to be here and work remotely with them in Prince Albert. And by working on this church, it really gives me a new purpose. I take this as my full-time job now, right? I look at this as being my opportunity to use this year to learn and grow, and serve my family, and perhaps create some function within this building that allows me to continue to do and advocate for the passions I have, which has been fantastic. And that's been the true lesson of all this is that, you just roll with it, you pivot, and you be intentional with what I'm trying to do, which is intentional with my family, intentional with recognizing the value of community and family relationship, and trying to diminish the financial piece to a level where it doesn't drive or control every decision I make. And hopefully others can get to this place, because if we can get there, then our cups run over, and we can start to advocate our passions and really use our gifts for ways that are more than just survival, right? And I feel for everyone right now, because I feel that there's so many families and people out there that are in survival mode, right? And that's tough.
Absolutely, Aaron. Yeah, absolutely. And Aaron, I want to talk for a minute, because when I lost my job almost 3.5 years ago, I can't tell you how supportive my wife was through a difficult time. I mean, it hit us like you. And as you're telling your story, I'm having flashbacks to August 23rd, 2017, the day it happened to me, and how my wife just held in there, and she's like, hey, we're going to get through this and do that. How important was your wife's support when you get that phone call in July? How important was your wife and her support to what happened to you, one, but ultimately where you were going to?
Yeah. Immensely. I mean, without it, it's truly nothing without that support. I can't overemphasize how important her participation in this conversation has always been. And it wasn't just today. I mean, the decision to live as a family really came to our family 10 years ago. It came in 2010, and that wasn't the time where we decided it. That's the time when we moved from Edmonton, Alberta, to Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, a city of 1 million to a city of 40,000 people, a corporate, in job where you're working with, dynamic industry and all the rest of it too.
Hey, I have an Edmonton Eskimos hat that I am proud of to have. Yeah. We went to Windsor, Canada probably 8 years ago. And I told my son, I said, I want something from Canada. And we went to this outlet mall, and we walked in this sports store, and he bought an Edmonton Eskimos t-shirt, and I bought a Edmonton Eskimo. No, I bought a Saskatchewan Roughriders hat. That's what
That's what I want to hear, man.
I bought a Saskatchewan. I should have broke it out, man. My fault.
You should have.
I should have. But here's the thing that I will do for you now, my friend. Behind me is my professional background. Normally, I have the Intentional Encourager podcast background. The Saskatchewan Roughriders hat will now have a place on the mantle just for you.
I love it.
Just
That's
for
awesome.
you, Aaron Kuchirka.
Well,
you were just for you, man.
You were taking me to places I didn't want to go when you're talking about the Eskimos. I love the Eskimos, don't get me wrong, but Saskatchewan's my home, and the Rough Riders, that's where it's at, man.
And here's the thing, Aaron. Let me pivot here for just a quick second, and we'll go back to you were talking about your sweet wife.
My wife and how she brought that in. Yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
But let's pivot here for just a second. For the first time in the history of the CFL, there's no football this year. For the first time, and that league has been around. I want to say since the
100
40s.
plus.
Yeah, 100 plus years. Them and the NFL are about the same age. How are Canadians dealing with no football? And hockey got messed up this year where they were playing in bubbles and things like that. The Blue Jays couldn't play in Canada, so they had to play in Buffalo. How are Canadians dealing with? Because sports is like Americans, sports is a huge part of the Canadian culture. And so how are Canadians kind of dealing with no CFL football, and the hockey season has been delayed a little bit, and they don't know how they're going to do that this year. How are Canadians dealing with that?
It's on two levels, right? You either participate or you watch, right? And so right now, the watchers are hurting hard, of course. There's not a lot of content, and so what are you watching? Virtual sports for most part, but so that's unfortunate, and it really hurts because our leagues, and our sport teams have a smaller following, but it's dedicated, it's passionate. You take the Saskatchewan Roughriders, for example. We're a province of 1 million people, but we support a team like that, and it's the brand is known throughout the world. And that's tough. This club might fold. I mean, it's quite possible the entire league may fold because it's so dependent on butts in the seats that that might be a reality, and that's tough. That's
I don't
really
understand.
Tough.
Yeah, and I don't understand that because here in the States, it's different. So I'm a Cincinnati Bengals fan. Yesterday they played the New York Giants. There were about 10,000 people in Paul Brown Stadium, of a stadium that holds 60,000. At least in some places, and I was watching Green Bay and Chicago last night, they don't have any fans in Lambeau Field.
Yeah.
I just wondered, though, how and it breaks my heart, too, that, to your point, there may no longer be, after 2020, a Saskatchewan Roughriders football team. They could be gone. The CFL, and my son and I have enjoyed CFL football. I've seen some Thursday night games.
Quality ball, man.
It's incredibly entertaining. The 3 downs, the 3 downs versus 4 in the American pro game. Hockey, obviously, the junior leagues in Canada for hockey are world class. I mean, it's world class hockey. I didn't mean to pivot there, but I'm glad you brought that. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, I just, and I'm the thing that I often think about, and I go deep on some of this stuff, but it's mental health, right? And when I worked for the Saskatchewan government, and our team was the Forest Service. We're the Saskatchewan Forest Service. I was the executive director, and we really focused a lot on mental health. And I think so much about mental health during this period of time. And it's not so much, a lot of people get upset about the salaries and the disproportionate amount of money that goes towards entertainment. And we see that more now than anything else, that is exposed, if you will. Right. But you also start to see the value of those diversions as well. Right.
Yeah. And
how in this time where people are just so overwhelmed mentally with everything, we need escape, and it's missing. This piece is missing, and it's missing And I know in the United States, it's a watch culture, very, very, and that's great. It's a very full watch culture. Here we might get 1 million, 2 million people to watch a game on TV. That's the difference, right? But we'll get 15,000 butts of ferocious fans in the stands, right? So, but even hockey, here we play hockey all the time. Kids are in hockey. It's winter now, and right now a lot of families aren't able to participate as a family. So they drop the kids off the door, fully dressed. The kid goes into the game, practices, they come out, and then mom and dad pick them up at the door. This used to be an entire experience for many families on a weekend, right? Yes. Getting dressed, going to the game, helping the kid tie the skates, get out on the ice, watch the game, cheer, celebrate, go for a bag of chips afterwards, right? And now it's that whole piece is missing. We moved to an area, primarily, this is a big part of why we moved here, is I can't be locked in over this winter again. And in Saskatchewan, where I live in Saskatchewan, where we used to live in Saskatchewan, it's a colder area, right? And so here in British Columbia, further south, the average temperature is around 0. I'll just use that works for both Celsius and Fahrenheit. Yeah. And so we have skiing and snowshoeing and all kinds of things. So, again, the need to reopen ski hills and reopen, these sort of recreational things is so huge just for our mental health.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton here. I want to tell you about our sponsor, SEO National. SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. Now what's that, you might say? Well, Search Engine Optimization helps you show up higher on search engines in front of paying customers for words that you as a business owner can monetize. What a great concept. SEO National is owned by my good buddy Damon Burton, who's been a guest here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Not only has Damon and his team worked with businesses of all sizes, from e-commerce startups to NBA teams and Shark Tank featured businesses, but more importantly, Damon and his team are about transparency, trust, and providing lifetime value. So much so that he still has his first customers after opening SEO National 14 years ago. Let me give you some intentional encouragement and call Damon and his team today at 855-736-6285 or go to www.seonational.com and get a free quote. Well, how close are you to Vancouver, BC?
About 6 hours east of Vancouver. Oh, wow. And then about 6 hours west of Calgary. So we're kind of right in the middle of those two big cities.
Yeah, and Vancouver and Calgary are two of the great western cities of Canada because of their diversity and the things to do and the quality of life, as you just mentioned, the quality of life. And I'll say this, many Canadians would feel like that the center or the forward or the goalie, and forgive me for not knowing any names, I should have, the best player on the Montreal Canadiens is worth far more than the Canadian Prime Minister. Most Canadians would say, that's fine. Pay them whatever they want. And Justin Trudeau can go fly a kite for all we care, as long as, but, and Aaron, what I loved seeing a few years ago were the Atlanta Thrashers moving back to Winnipeg and becoming the Winnipeg Jets. That was so cool. And I read an article about a week or so ago where there's groundswell again to bring a team back to Quebec City. And so for years you saw a lot of Canadian teams migrating south. And what the realization is that the true, to your point, the true hockey fans, those teams are returning back to Canada because they know that their support is solid. I mean, it's really solid. It's not going anywhere. And I think that's really good. Edmonton for years, with the Edmonton Oilers, I mean, just rabid support. The Canucks in Vancouver, rabid support. The Flames in Calgary, rabid support. And that's awesome. Speaking of mental health, I want to go here with you for just a second. I'm glad you brought that up. Right after you got let go, let's pivot back to that for just a second. Right after you got let go, you're talking about the support of your wife and things like that. How was your mental health in the days and weeks after that? Because that's a devastating event that you're unprepared for. It's unplanned. That really can take a toll on a lot of people. What was your state of mind in those first couple of weeks and first month or so?
Oh, really healthy, positive, but cautious, right? And the reason I say this, I'm 43 years old, so I'm not, I got a lot to learn, but been through a lot too, right? So, the hardest period in my life was when I was thinking about accepting the job for executive director of the Forest Service. That was the hardest period because my anxiety at that point in time went through of an anxiety disorder that I had and how that was impacting my life. And at that point in time, I went on medication, I went in counseling, and I started to really think about mental health. And so when this other major life-changing, and it's funny, that one was, really positive. You're being offered a promotion and it was still very difficult. When this one happened, when I got fired, it was, like I said, almost a relief because I knew in many ways it was coming. And I didn't know when, and I didn't know how, but I knew that this relationship wasn't going to last forever, and that was okay. And I'd come to very clear terms with that. I'd already moved on in many ways and thinking about what that next step looked like for me. So when this happened, the anxiety went through the roof, and the mental health first aid then really kicked in and really started to think about, okay, how am I feeling? Was very aware of myself, and the anxiety was starting to go high. And then you reach out, right? You start to look for resourcing. I spoke to my wife. I spoke to my counselor at that point in time. I spoke to my doctor. And I just, was very transparent with the illness and just saying, I feel these symptoms. It's a very stressful point in time. This is natural. Most, if ever, all would feel this way. But let's just be really, conscious about how we work through it because, you've been here before. And you can manage this. And so it's not to say that the impact was any different or that I, thankfully now have a lot of awareness about mental health and how it triggers me personally and how I work through that personally. And so I'm a huge advocate, again, of, just talking about people's mental health, and that can be anxiety, depression, any way you're feeling. And then really just thinking about how you work through it and being aware of yourself. And that to me is one of the largest steps, is if you're aware of those triggers and how you're going to feel and react, and you can, treat, right? And,
100%.
Yeah.
And there are good days and bad days. There are days that you feel really good and you feel positive and upbeat. And then there are days you just kind of get kicked in the teeth. You're like, oh man, this stinks. I remember, and I'll go here for just a second, and then we'll get in more of your story. I remember there were days after I lost my job that were really good. And there were days of like, man, why am I going through this? Like, what did I do? Like, God, what did I do to deserve this? And for the first time in my life, and I've said this, Aaron, for the first time in my life, I really came face to face with anxiety, depression, fear, doubt, things that I'd never really dealt with before, even after my dad died, but I came face to face with those, and I learned it's like, okay, I'd never really had to go through those things. And so going through them was like, okay, I now know when they start to come at me again, I'm like, I know how to deal with it. And so you're 100% right. And I was reading an article last night, and they were talking about in Japan how suicides are more deadly than COVID. And I'm like, good grief, we have got to, got to, as a world, come face to face with this and say, hey, we've got to do some things differently, because we're going to lose way more people to suicide than we're ever going to lose to COVID if we don't get our arms wrapped around this. And I know the virus is deadly, and I know that it's nothing to play around with. I get that. But man, we have got to come to terms with, there are hurting people out there that if we don't continue to, if we've got to open some things up to get people, back to some semblance of normalcy. I want to pivot for just a minute, and I want to get to your story, and you go back as far as you want to go with telling your story. I'm just going to give you the floor. I'm just going to kind of shut up and let you take it. And I may jump in from times But take me back into your story and your
Okay.
life as
You
far
do
as
it,
you want
man.
to go.
Okay. You know, and I always like to start, you know, again, I feel like my story is divided into two parts. The time I met my wife and decided to be part of a family, and a time where I was part of another family, and that was, you know, my mom and dad, and growing up and discovering who I was. But, you know, I met my wife in 2007 and met her in Edmonton, Alberta. And I had traveled from Saskatchewan at 17 to Edmonton to go to school. And I tried engineering, and I tried science and everything else. And I did construction. I was, you know, a lot of different stuff, hands-on, really learning. But a lot of it just, it wasn't my thing. I loved learning, always learning new things and growing. And so finally I found leadership. I found business, right? And I went into business, and I got a business degree, and I got an accounting designation. I'm a CPA as well. And you know, good with numbers and everything, but it wasn't really my passion. I didn't really like working with numbers. I like working with people. I like explaining, you know, the information to people and helping drive decisions and help change things. And so that was a real passion. I finished that one finally, and started working in a lot of audit and compliance work in a non-traditional accounting world, and was really moving up through it and learning a lot and becoming successful, making great contacts, and you know, again, focused on making money, doing well financially, right? Those things that seemed important. And so then I met my wife in 2007, and we met online. And this is where, again, where you know, I think that the lesson and learning about the trust of online was established for me, you know, at an early, you know, a long time ago, where you put yourself out there into the world, just like this situation today, Brian, where we put ourselves out into LinkedIn, and we expose ourselves, and we put ourselves out there vulnerably. And then ultimately you and I connect in this way, right? And we have this
it's about being authentic,
real life
Aaron.
connection.
It's about being authentic. And that's the thing that I wish we had more of. I wish we didn't. And I'm glad you brought that up. So I got to go here for just a second.
Give her. Yeah.
It amazes me, the people on social media that hide behind avatars, that aren't their authentic selves. And that's what I appreciate about the LinkedIn platform that you and I connected on, is it seems that platform is full of authentic people. Like they're going, I'm not hiding behind an avatar. This is who I am. If you want to connect with me, let's connect. And it seems like on other platforms, it's the opposite. It's like, well, I'll just say whatever I want to say and spew as much toxicity as I want to spew, and I'll hide behind this avatar so nobody knows who I really am. And I love what you said there about opening yourself up and you being authentically Aaron, and your wife being her authentic self, and how it came together for you to meet this beautiful woman that you ended up being married to.
Yeah, and it's a cool story. So, you know, we meet online, and so we meet for ice cream, and well, not only before we even meet for ice cream, it's like, where are you from? Well, I'm from a small town in Saskatchewan, and she's like, holy shit, I'm from a small town in Saskatchewan, and we find that we lived like 40 minutes away from each other back when we were kids. And we played hockey in the same, not her, but I played hockey against her brother in her small town. We had a lot of the same friends. And it just, again, so through the internet, in a city of 1 million people, I find this one woman who lived 40 kilometers. We have all this connection, right? All this, and it's just, you know, again, opening that up to that. And she was authentic with who she was, and we met, and we went out for ice cream, and the rest is history. 9 months later, you know, we were married, and then we were deciding, okay, well, now what do we do with our lives? And we decided we both wanted to move back to where we were from. So we went, you know, we had our daughter, and then we had our son in 2010, and we were very focused then on leaving corporate behind and really focusing on filling our family and focusing on our family and moving to a place where you can make less money, but it's a smaller place with mom and dad are there, and you know, the recreational opportunities with lakes and rivers and camping and everything else are there. And so we made that very deliberate choice, and we took it. I took a huge pay cut, and she was, we were all, we worked through this. We made this decision together, a very deliberate, intentional decision to move to another province and start at a different place. Because again, refocusing, recentering on family. And that was fantastic. And so I got a job with the Ministry of Environment within the Saskatchewan government. And I was a manager within them. And it was, again, I've never worked in forestry, but as the full circle turns, one of my first jobs was as worked at a sawmill when I was 12 years old. So, back into the forest industry again, which again, it just sort of strange how these things come around. And so I worked as a manager within this and built a team. It was a smaller team, and I loved them, and they really connected with me. And I learned so much about leadership and developing people and emotional intelligence and human health and, and safety and primarily learned about the environment and developed a huge passion for protecting and serving the environment.
See, I'm listening to your story. Yeah, Aaron, I'm listening to your story, man, and it's like, okay, how do you get a job at a sawmill at 12 years old? That's amazing, man. Like I would have never thought at 12 to get a job at a sawmill. That's incredible, man. That is
slabs,
so,
man.
Yeah, that is so good, man.
Yeah.
That's
where you get the big pipes, Yeah. So
yes, you're just rolling along with your story, and like, yeah, I liked forestry. I got a job at a sawmill when I was 12. I'm like, wait. That is so good, man. That is so good.
I know it comes together. So go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna say it's a love, right? Yeah, it's the love, right? It was really the passion. I lived in an area in Saskatchewan. A lot of people don't know this about Saskatchewan, but if you see a flag of Saskatchewan, it's yellow on the bottom, green on the top, very deliberately, because half our province is agriculture, our other half is forestry. And so I lived in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, was right on the forest fringe. So below me, we farmed. My dad was a farmer, and above me, we camped, right? Or we went and got firewood, or whatever, because the forest was in our backyard, and it really developed a sense of loving the environment, loving nature, loving that integration between managed areas like forestry, like agriculture, and then unmanaged areas like forestry and the wild north and those types of sort of concepts and ideas, right? So I was fortunate then to come back and work for an organization that was serving forests, right, and trying to protect and utilize them in the right way. It was awesome.
I had to break in there. That just blew my mind. It's like, when I was 12, I was working in my uncle's snack bar, and here you are, I was working in a sawmill,
Well,
yeah.
It's 12 in Saskatchewan's different, right? Half of my friends are probably running combines by that age, you know what I mean? So, driving grain trucks, but
that is
for
so
sure
good.
we were.
Half my friends were running combines at 12. Oh, that's great. That is so good. Hey, I want to ask you this because this has been such a fantastic conversation. I have enjoyed the daylights out of this, as we say in West Virginia.
Absolutely.
I want to get to the biggest obstacle that you've overcame, and maybe you touched on it, but maybe there's another obstacle in your life that you overcame. And what was the greatest lesson, Aaron, that you learned from it?
I think the biggest obstacle is it was a transition. When I was young and growing up, and we didn't have a lot of money. We were poor farmers in Saskatchewan. We lived poor, and it was a great lesson. My dad gets so mad at me for telling this, because he's like, we were not poor. We were never poor. And we weren't poor in his mind, and in my mind, we were never poor. Never felt that way. But when I look back on it now, I say, no, look, we didn't have a lot of money. We weren't well off. But the lesson you taught me, Dad and Mom, is that we were rich beyond our wildest dreams. We had a beautiful environment to live in. We had a family that loved us. He took us to church we needed to play hockey, 3 boys all winter long. That was a massive commitment that my parents made for our for me and my brothers and growing up in the place that we did. And they did that for a long time and suffered through that for a long time, at their own expense. My dad had to go away to work. He had to go away for months at a time to work to make money to come back so he could continue to own and operate his farm because he couldn't make money on it, right? So I was not aware of this lesson, though. That was me living it. But when I got married and I had 2 children, I really started to then be really conscious of that lesson and wanting to then apply it to my own life, right? And recognizing that, we can't just focus on having our buckets so full of money and have that being our sole focus in life, right? You can't be so focused on, if only we paid off the mortgage, right?
Yeah.
Instead, it's about thinking about where all of those balances come from. And I've really changed my viewpoint. A lot of people talk about work-life balance. And I don't balance. I think you need to find where we find these 4 pivot points, and then we won't find center. So because if we're only moving one way, life, work, back, forth, that's linear. And we're not linear people. We don't transition from 8 until 5 we're this work, and then from 5 until this we're life. No, we're people. It's not about that. So we need to find financial balance, physical balance, emotional, and we find that center. That's what my family's taught me. That's the lesson that my mom and dad taught me, is that it's not just about finding your financial center. It's about finding all of those centers together, and you can really be happy in the pursuit of all of them, right?
I love what you said there, man.
Whether they fully realize themselves or whether that pot is of it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I love that, because what you said there is really important, because people seem to think that they have to separate. It's like, okay, I have to act this way at work. I have to act this way at church. I have to act. And my thing is, if I have to think a lot, as the older I get, I'm 48. The more I have to think about stuff, the less interested I get in it. If I can just be the same way all the time, it's much easier for me, because then I'm like, listen, this is, if you're requiring me to make a lot of effort, then nah, that's not what I want to do. Cause I'll put forth the effort in my work and things like that. And I don't want to confuse that, but my point is, I would much rather everything just be real simple. Just be easy. Just be in sales, be easy to do business with, things like that. And so I love that, being centered in everything, so you don't have to worry about it. Aaron, my last question, man, this has been so good. I have flat enjoyed this conversation. Take me and share with the audience your biggest piece of intentional encouragement.
Yeah.
Having some bandwidth problems here, so just hang tight, Aaron. So share with me your biggest piece of intentional encouragement.
For me, it's about just being that way. Let's just be, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Let's just be, let's just live. Let's just be transparent and honest of intention. And I think that if we can do that, we're going to make mistakes. We're human. We always do. But just be satisfied and confident that if you operate with positive intention, that you've really done the best you can, and you can go to sleep without that narrative in your head. You can let that go to rest, and you can just go and wake up the next day and continue to operate with positive intention, and on we go, right? And fearless forward. Yesterday was, or what tomorrow will bring, and try to bring.
Yeah, I love that. That is so good, man. Just think about today, and that's awesome. Aaron, this has been such great conversation. I would strongly encourage folks to connect with Aaron on LinkedIn. Aaron. His last name is spelled Kuchirka. Connect with him on LinkedIn. I went ahead and followed Bought a Church on Facebook. Go to Bought a Church on Facebook, and you can chronicle with Aaron and his family their journey in buying a church. And just connect up with him. Aaron, this has been a blast. I have enjoyed this thoroughly. By the way, 12-year-olds running combines. That will be in my head for a long time, man. That is so good. Aaron Kuchirka, thank you so much for joining me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
Oh, thank you, Brian. It's been fantastic. I love sharing and hearing your story as well. So I love this platform. I love what you're doing. Keep it up.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you. And thank you for joining us on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through his word. And until next time, remember, everyone, everywhere, at any time, and any place can be an intentional